Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, it's great to meet you. I'm Stella, and today I'll show you how to make this miniature window and blinds set for your dolls. And as always, I have free printable templates to help you make your own version. You'll find everything in the video, so now let's get started. To make the window, we'll start by cutting this part of the template 2 or 3 times, and we'll glue all the layers together. The final piece should be about 1mm thick, and as usual I suggest using cardstock from old packaging for this, since it's, free and I love upcycling. But also it's quite thick and yet very easy to cut. You can use a cutting machine if you have one, or just regular scissors, a craft knife, and for tiny holes like these, a nail or a needle. Next, we'll cut this little strip a few times and we'll stack the layers in 2 groups, each roughly 2mm thick. We'll do the same for this part. And now we'll attach the 4 bars to the frame we prepared earlier this way. At this point, we'll just have to paint the assembled piece with acrylics. Next, we'll cut this part from a piece of clear plastic, and I totally recycled more old packaging for this. Then we'll cut this frame twice, and this time I suggest using either a lighter type of cardstock or even just copy paper. We'll glue the 2 frames to the plastic layer. And then we'll make a second identical piece. Next, we'll cut this part 3 or 4 times, and we'll stack all the layers together. The final piece should be about 2mm thick. Then we'll cut this frame twice, we'll attach one part to the little bar we've just assembled, and then we'll paint both pieces with acrylics. We'll attach the resulting frames to the panels we prepared earlier. Then we'll glue one of the panels to the base we made at the beginning, aligned at the top. Next, we'll grab a couple of toothpicks, we'll cut them at a length of roughly 4 cm, and we'll slide them into the grooves in the window's base this way. At this point, we'll simply have to glue the second panel to the toothpicks, and the window should slide up and down quite easily. Next, we'll cut the strip a few times and we'll glue all the layers in 2 groups, each roughly 2mm thick. We'll do the same for this part. Then we'll glue the finished bars to the window, making sure that they're at the same height as the window's moving panel. Next, we'll cut this part twice and we'll glue the 2 sides together. We'll attach the resulting piece to the rest of the window's frame, and while the glue dries, I recommend sliding the window's moving part up and down so it doesn't stick shut. Finally, we'll paint the frame with acrylics. Just a little note, in theory, this moving panel should stay in place on its own, but if gravity decides to fight us, that's where these little holes come in handy. We'll just have to slide a couple of pins into the left and right sides of the frame, and the panel will rest right on top of them. I didn't personally need to use them, but, just in case. Next up, let's make a small working Venetian blind. Not gonna lie, this took me a while to figure out. I'm not gonna say how many days I spent trying to crack this because frankly it's embarrassing. And you can try to guess if you want, but I bet you won't even get close. Anyway, in the end I managed to build something that's definitely not perfect, but it works, so I'll take that as a win. So the first thing we want to do is cut this strip many times. For the size we're aiming for, around 30 bars should do the trick. You can change the number of strips depending on how long you want your blind to be. Just keep in mind it has to be an even number. And just a little note, these bars are quite easy to cut by hand, but I know doing that many can get pretty time consuming, so I've designed an alternative version that's much more hand cut friendly, and I'll show you how to make that in just a minute. Otherwise, if you're working with a cutting machine like a Cricut, a Silhouette, or an M1 Ultra like mine, you can use my digital templates. They're available in my shop, linked in the description. As for the material, I suggest using lightweight cardstock, but covering it on one side with some clear tape so that it has a nice shiny finish. We'll place all the strips down using this part of the template as a placement guide, and I use a tiny bit of non-permanent glue to keep them in place. Next up, we'll need some ribbon, ideally the same color as the blinds. I recycled some old ribbon I just had laying around. We'll cut the ribbon into 3 strips, each 18 centimeters long, and as a reference, the ribbons should be roughly 1 centimeter longer than your window. We'll glue the ribbons to the cardstock strips, placing them exactly over all the holes on the sides and center of the strips. And just a quick heads up, I had a really hard time gluing the ribbons to the strips because none of my glues would stick to the clear tape I used to cover the cardstock. I ended up cutting a second set of strips from regular paper, glued the ribbons to those, then trimmed laminated cardstock into smaller pieces and glued them to the sides of the ribbons. Long story short, it took forever and it was pretty boring, but I still think it was worth it and that the glossy finish looks way better than matte. Just something to keep in mind. Next, we'll cut this part 4 times and we'll glue the layers in pairs. We'll attach the resulting bars to the back of the first and last bars of the blind. And this is totally optional, but I painted these bars white to match the color of the rest of the strips. Next up, we'll need some sewing thread, possibly in the same color as the ribbon we used earlier. We'll slide the thread into this first hole, pulling it from the back to the front. Then we'll slide it into the next hole, this time pulling from the front to the back. And depending on how thick your ribbon is, it might be easier to pre-pierce all the holes with a needle, so the thread slides through more easily. We'll have to repeat this back and forth until all the holes in this row are threaded. Then we'll pull out enough thread to cover the short side and the opposite long side of the blind, plus a big extra. In short, a lot of thread. We'll repeat the exact same process for the second row of holes. Next, we'll thread both of these loose strands onto the same needle, and then we'll pass them through the last row of holes, once again alternating the side we pull the thread from. At this point, we can glue these 2 loose threads to the back of the blind. And now it's time to see if the lift mechanism works. We'll start by concertina folding the blind, basically folding it front to front and back to back. And now we'll just have to pull the cord. Okay, so it's not perfect. The right side folds slower than the left somehow, which didn't happen in my prototype, and we have to pull it down by hand since the lift only works one way, but dare I say, I'm still kinda happy with it. Next, we'll knot the cords around 1 or 2 beads. And we'll trim away the thread in excess. Next, we'll cut this part twice and we'll glue 2 layers together. We'll attach the top of the ribbons to this cardstock base, aligned with these holes. And finally, we'll sew them in place. Next, we'll cut this part multiple times. We'll stack all the layers until we reach a thickness of about 3 millimeters. And then we'll glue the finished piece to the previous one this way. Next, we'll cut this part from lightweight cardstock, again covered with clear tape, and we'll fold the sides like this. We'll glue the resulting piece to the top of the blind this way. Next, we'll grab a couple of eye pins and we'll glue them into these holes in the back of the blind's top. This will let us hang the blinds on the wall as long as they're made with my wall from scratch method, and you can see this process more clearly in this video. Last but not least, here's the alternative, hand-cut friendly way to make the blind. We'll simply cut this part from lightweight cardstock, then we'll score all these lines. We'll concertina fold the rectangle using a couple of rulers to make it easier. And finally, we'll pull a sewing thread through the holes, just like we did for the first version of the blind. Lastly, we'll sew the blinds to its top part, this way. Now, unfortunately, the lift mechanism doesn't work quite as well as the first version. You'll need to get the blind by hand and it doesn't fold all the way up. That said, it's so much quicker and easier to make that I honestly think it's a solid alternative. Even if you have a cutting machine, the assembly is so fast that if you don't care about the fully working aspect, this might actually be the better option. Plot twist, I know. As promised, here's a link to the free printable templates, and if you want to learn how to make a working Roman blind, check out this video next. And this is all for today. Until next time, bye!